One of my greatest teachers in life has been Seneca, who was a Roman philosopher who died 2,000 years ago. And I wanted to share something with you in this video that he said in his book on the shortness of life that redefines how you look at your time. This is what he said. He said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." He said life is long enough and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. This is a quote that I really thought a lot about, and not even just the whole thing, but particularly the last two words. Well invested. What does it mean for your time to be well invested? We all spend time, we all use time, we all waste time, but think about it. How many people invest their time well? Just like somebody invests their money, they put it in the stock market, they put it in real estate, they invest in assets. People that manage their time well invest their time. That means they spend their time in things that will pay them a return either immediately or in the future, in either wisdom, in health, in money, in relationships, in peace of mind, in something tangible that they can get. And this redefines time management. Time management is not managing time so you can compartmentalize things. It's not using time so you get everything done in a day. It means you invest your time in a way that will give you a return. Anything that doesn't give you a return is time wasted. Anything that does is time management. That's the framework I want to give you in this course, and I hope you can start looking at time as something that is to be invested and not just something that needs to be used. In the next section, I want to share with you the 7 specific things that you can do to become more productive, taken from my course, How to Double Your Productivity by Tomorrow Morning. Before I do, I want to share with you a big time management obstacle that I want you to avoid, and how avoiding this is a major key to you having the productivity that you want. And the obstacle is this: having to think in real time. It's having to think the day of, what is it that I'm going to work on? If you're always thinking, what do I need to be doing next? What do I need to be doing now? Then, first of all, it's a huge drain of mental energy. We all only have a limited amount of willpower. We all only have a limited amount of mental capacity. And if we're wasting it on what do I need to do now or what do I need to do next, you're taking away energy that could be used to do productive things. But also it's a huge waste of time because all these things can be figured out beforehand. So the answer is rituals. The answer is routine. The answer is having a framework that your day is set up in and a framework for what you work on that gives you predictable returns so you don't have to think about those things, and then your only job is executing the framework, not every day building a new framework from scratch. For example, I've spent months, maybe even years, refining my framework, and because of that, I know what my morning looks like. I know what my afternoon looks like. I know what I'm going to be working on, and I know what work gives me the highest return. And some people even told me, look, that's boring. You can't live in routine. And maybe there's some truth to that, but there's more truth in the fact that routine brings freedom. Think about this. Think about someone who wants to use an axe to chop down a tree. If that person goes and hits the axe against the tree one time, that won't do anything. They need to do it over and over and over at the same place, at the same tree to have any result. And that's what a framework is. The opposite of that is hitting one tree and then moving to another tree and then moving to another tree and moving to another tree, which is how most people use their time, especially when they come up with a new framework every time. So I really encourage you to come up with a ritual, come up with a framework you can use that will give you the highest return on your time, that will give you a predictable return on your time. And that's what these 7 things that I want to share with you are all about. That's what the rest of the course is devoted to. So let's jump right into it. The most important ritual you can put in place is your morning ritual. Because if you get up in the morning and do things that get you feeling great, to make the most out of the day ahead, you'll be way more productive that day. Imagine the difference between that and your alarm just going off in the morning, snoozing 3 times, rolling out of bed, eating something quickly, and then heading out the door in a half daze. When you have a morning ritual, you get fired up and in the right mindset to go after what you want to get done that day. For this reason alone, it's a must. The time you invest by doing this first instead of jumping straight to work will pay you huge returns in productivity. But there's an even more important reason to do this. You see, Hal Elrod, who wrote the book, The Miracle Morning, which is all about setting up a morning ritual, said that we think to achieve more, we need to do more. But in reality, to achieve more, we need to become more. When you become more, you achieve more by doing less. So the even more important benefit of your morning ritual is personal development. You're investing that time not just for the day, but for your life. It's like Jim Rohn, the great speaker, said, income seldom exceeds personal development. Success is something you attract by the person you become. So you want to invest this first part of the day in things that get you in the right state of mind and things that, if done again and again, help you become the person you can become. Here's how Hal Elrod recommends breaking your morning ritual down. He describes it by the acronym SAVERS. He says to start by some sort of silence or meditation first off to get centered, and then affirmations, followed by visualization, exercise, reading, and scribing, which is a fancy word for writing in a journal. Now, you don't have to do all of these things, but here is what I'd recommend doing as a bare minimum. Firstly, exercise. You want to invest this time in getting strong, healthy, and more importantly, feeling awake and energized for the day ahead. This can be walking out the door and going for a walk. It could be 10 minutes on a rebounder, or it could be a full workout, but even just 10 to 20 minutes first thing in the morning is enough. Next is reading your purpose out loud with enthusiasm. You've written down your purpose and now you want to remind yourself, and not only remind yourself, but get excited about going after your vision and your purpose that day. And lastly, visualize. You want to visualize a scene where you've achieved your purpose and you want to play that movie in your mind. But also visualize your day ahead. Visualize the day going perfectly. Visualize how you're going to be productive. Visualize how you're going to go about getting everything done and how you're going to avoid distractions. Roy Williams, who wrote the book The Wizard of Ad, said that the first step to doing something is seeing it in your mind. And whatever you want to get done for the day, see yourself doing it as part of your ritual. Now, also ask yourself, is there anything else that you want to add that will help you toward being the person you want to become? I do recommend starting as simple as possible, but if there is something else you want to add it in there as well. And then most importantly, write it down and start tomorrow morning. The most important thing I learned in college wasn't anything I learned in class, it was how I learned to study. Because while everyone else spent hours studying while checking Facebook and going on their phones, I would get in the zone. You see, in the book Flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about the psychology of optimal experience. He talks about the state of being fully engaged in what you're doing, where you feel like you lose sense of time and where the work you do feels effortless. And he calls this the flow state. Other people sometimes call it getting in the zone. But can you see how being in that state would exponentially increase your productivity? The problem is most of us rarely experience it, and if we do, it's by accident. But assuming you are working on something that excites you, like we talked about earlier, the biggest key to getting in this state is working in chunks of uninterrupted time. That means picking one and only one thing to work on, putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, which I do, or turning it off, and working for a predefined amount of time, giving it all your mental power with zero interruptions and zero multitasking. This one simple thing is the biggest game changer for productivity. Peter Drucker, who's the most famous management thinker ever, recommended working in chunks of 2 hours at a time or more, but you don't have to go to that extreme. What is important, though, is that you do work in chunks of uninterrupted time. I personally work in chunks of either 50 minutes at a time or 90 minutes at a time, but let's just keep this simple. So first of all, buy an electronic timer. You want to start working by the clock. And if you use your phone as a timer, that's not an option because that would just be a distraction. You'll check your phone, you'll see, oh, I have this text, let me respond, and so on. So you don't want to do that. Next, decide a predetermined amount of time that you're going to work in. You can do 50 minutes with 10-minute breaks. You can do 90 minutes with 20 or 30-minute breaks or something else. For now, let's just start with 45 minutes straight and with 15-minute breaks just to get started. You can then change this amount of time at any point for however long makes sense for you, but I'd rather start with less time straight since most people usually interrupt themselves about every 3 minutes when they work. And by the way, there was a study that showed it takes over 23 minutes to get back in the zone after an interruption, assuming you were in the zone in the first place. So that really goes to show how important it is to really get in the zone and stay in the zone, not interrupting yourself and not letting anybody else interrupt you as well. You really need to defend this time and cut off all possible distractions, namely email, phone, or anybody who could potentially interrupt you. So when you start working for the day, commit to working by the timer. Put 45 minutes on the timer and work for 45 minutes straight. And then when that's done, put the timer for 15 minutes and take a 15-minute break. When you work, you should work on things, by the way, that will pay you a return in your work life. But what about during your breaks? You see, most people, their idea of a break is let me go on Facebook or do something that pays no return, but you really want your breaks to be high quality. You can even go so far to say that the quality of your work is determined by the quality of your break, because unless you feel refreshed and enthusiastic, you're not going to be able to give it your all when you work. So if you invest this break time in things that make you feel refreshed, and more importantly, even maybe investing this time to again become the person you can be, like Hal Elrod talked about, you're making the best use of this time. So maybe for one of these breaks, for example, you meditate. Maybe for another, you go for a walk. We'll talk about organizing all your breaks and work time and so forth a little bit later, but the real takeaway I want you to get is this. Most people are extremely unproductive because they don't go full force with their work, and then they don't go full force with their breaks either. When they're working, they're sneaking in interruptions and breaks, and when they're taking a break, they're thinking about work. And the result is they can't think straight, they don't have the energy they need to do their best, and they don't get that much done. But by oscillating between a give it your all, get in the zone, uninterrupted chunk of time, and then a give it your all, feel completely refreshed break, you'll feel more clear, you'll get in the flow state, and if you work for even half the time that you did before, you'll get more done. Because ultimately, you see people talk about, oh, I worked 10 hours or 12 hours or all these long days, but it doesn't matter how long you work for. Hours worked isn't the measure for productivity. The real measure is how much you've gotten done regardless of how long it takes. So decide how long you want to work in, get an electronic timer, and make sure you start doing this and see what a huge difference it makes. So you're now working in chunks of uninterrupted time. The question is, what do you work on in those chunks of time? And the answer is really simple. You work on things that move you measurably closer toward your goals. These could be things that you do every day on a regular basis or things that change based on what you're working on. But the key word there is measurably. You always need to be asking yourself, is what I'm doing right now just going to solidify the result I already have or do nothing for me? Or is it going to measurably move me closer? Is it actually going to help me get some sort of result? And I like to call this stuff 10x stuff. You want to work on 10x stuff. So stuff that will make you money or get you some sort of result. You see, Peter Drucker, the management thinker we talked about, said that business has only two functions: marketing and innovation. Everything else is a cost. And likewise, when you work, there are only one, two, or maybe three things that will give you some sort of result. If it's business, then again, those two things are marketing and innovation. And everything else is not an investment of your time, but a cost. So you want to stop seeing yourself as being productive for doing these things that are in reality a cost, but we fail to realize that that's what they are. So I really want you to think about right now, what are the high activity 10x things in your life and in your business? And as you continue doing this and you continue working in chunks of uninterrupted time, make sure to not get distracted by costs. Try to delegate costs as much as possible, or at least work on them at the end of the day. You want to focus your most productive time, the most important time, on 10x things. So keep that in mind and really ask yourself, what are the activities that pay me the highest? So the question returns is, what moves you measurably closer to your goals? And the only way to really answer that is by making a plan beforehand. You want to make a step-by-step plan for your major goals, and getting through that plan is what you do during your pre-scheduled time. And something else that's really important is you want to make sure that everything on that plan is really getting you measurably closer, because a lot of the time we put steps on there that don't move us in a straight line forward, but they move us just a little bit forward, but a lot to the left or the right, just tangentially, so to speak. And you really want to demand a 10x return on every step you put on your plan. And by the way, your plan could change, it could expand, but you really just want to have something to start with. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to make goals for your week, just so you have certain milestones to hit every week. The way I do this is I have a friend, we talk every week. We're very much on the same wavelength, working on similar things, and we have our little mastermind session then. And at the end of it, we share our goals for the week. So that's the time that I set my goals for the week and write it down. And the third component to really planning what you want to do are daily to-dos. So you have your overall plan, you have your goals for the week, just the milestones that you want to hit to move you closer, and also you want daily to-dos. And here's the shocker as far as your daily to-do list. Ideally, it should be only one thing. The more things it is, that means the smaller things you are working on, and the less likely any of those things are 10x things. And if you have to do a bunch of small things, that's fine. But first pick the one thing that really is going to pay you the return, and do all those smaller things at the end of the day. You see, you've probably heard of the 80-20 principle, that 80% of your results come from 20% of the things that you do. But you could even take that further and just demand, what is the one thing that I can do today that will give me the biggest return? You see, Gary Keller talks about this in his book, The One Thing, and he says to ask yourself, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will make everything else unnecessary? Or another way you can ask yourself the same thing is, what's the one thing I could do such that doing it will give me the highest return for the time invested? That really is the question to determine what is on your quote-unquote to-do list. And while we're on the topic, there's something else I want to share with you, which is probably the most important thing I can share with you as far as time management goes. You see, the reason it seems like there isn't enough time to do everything you want to do isn't because there is so much to do. The reality is that time management could be so easy that you would have too much free time you wouldn't know what to do with. So why does it seem like there is never enough time to do the things you want to do? And ironically, the answer is laziness or avoidance of fear. It's like Robert Kiyosaki, the #1 New York Times bestselling author, said. He said that staying busy is laziness because you stay busy to avoid something you don't want to face. Or Tim Ferriss adds on to this idea by saying that instead of focusing on the 2 or 3 things we need to do that would make us productive or contribute to our goals, We invent things to do to keep us busy. So busy that there isn't enough time left for those 2 or 3 things we should do, the things you don't want to face. The solution then, according to Tim Ferriss, is to ask yourself frequently, am I inventing things to do to avoid the important? Or as Randy Pausch, the famous professor at Carnegie Mellon, said in his lecture on time management, asking yourself, do I really need to do this? You want to catch yourself avoiding the important and stop being lazy, and you'll create way more free time and get way more done. So when it comes to making a plan, when it comes to your weekly goals and your daily to-do list, I want you to keep this in mind. I really want you to think about what are the 2 or 3 things that will really contribute, that will move me in a straight line toward my goals. And also keep in mind that often these things push us out of our comfort zone. They are uncomfortable. They're things that we might fail at, and that's why we don't want to face them. But if you really want to be productive, if you really want to achieve your goals, not only in the shortest amount of time possible, but maybe ever, then you're going to have to face these things. So you really want to keep this in mind when making your plans. So really think about this and really try to organize what you work on by first having plans, having week goals, and also having daily to-dos, and ideally focusing on only one. And if now you know everything you need to know to be way more productive, now let's put it all together. So what I like to do is put together an Excel sheet like the one you see here to see how well I'm doing on implementing these things that we talked about, and more importantly, to encourage myself to do them. And I think that it would be really helpful for you to do the same. So let me walk you through this really quickly. It's broken down into 2 things, the morning ritual and your work ritual, the 2 things we talked about. Obviously, in each of these things, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever works best for you. This is just a template that I wanted to share with you. Like we talked about, starting with exercise or a walk, then reading your purpose, then visualization, and something else that I think would be really helpful is reading. Something we talked about in my course, Become a Learning Machine, which is all about reading at least 100 books in a year, is creating a reading ritual. And this is something that you can do by putting it in your Excel sheet as well. And then for your work rituals, you can break it down into however many minutes work best for you. Again, this is just a template, but if you wanted to do 45 minutes and a 15-minute break, and then 45, and then have a lunch break or just another 15-minute break, and so on. And then you see here, the 4th chunk of time is devoted to doing those things that don't move you measurably closer to your goal, but you have to do, maybe it's email, maybe it's errands or whatever it is, and doing it all at once. Maybe you could do 2 of those chunks of time if you really need it. Maybe you want to do more chunks of uninterrupted time, whatever works best for you. What I've done here is put all 7 days of the week. You can just do 5 days a week. You can just do 6 days a week. It's really up to you. Anyway, I've put this Excel sheet in the resources section of this video. So download it, modify it for however works best for what you want to do, and start using it. Put a check mark next to everything that you accomplish. Build the momentum. And also you'll be able to look back and see how well you're doing. By the way, I think one reason this is so powerful is it helps you build these habits. When Jerry Seinfeld had a goal that he wanted to write jokes for a full year, for 365 days a year, he printed a huge calendar, put it on his wall, and every day that he did it, he put a check mark on that day. And this is essentially what you're doing by making an Excel sheet. Now let's finish putting everything together. So this is a second Excel sheet that I recommend you use. And here's how it works. The point of it is for you to write down the measurable things that you get done every day. This is going to keep you honest, so to speak. It's going to make sure that you're actually spending your time on things that matter. Something Peter Drucker talked about in his book, The Effective Executive, is keeping track of your time and seeing how much of it is actually put to productive use. And this is kind of a twist on that. Instead of keeping track of your time, you're keeping track of how much of what you've done is moving you measurably closer to your goal. And this does a couple things. First of all, it keeps you focused on doing things that move you measurably closer. And second of all, it gives you a feedback loop that you can go back to and be like, okay, on January 1st, wow, I only got that one thing done. I thought I was so busy. Felt like I got all those things done. But in reality, this was the only thing I got done that moves me measurably closer to my goals. let's start filling this in. Here's how it works. You've already written down your goals. So you write down your goals here on the top and the milestones for each goal that you're working on. And then here, every week, write the goals you have for the week. And then what I do here is I write the projects I'm working on within each goal. So for goal 1, I'm working on, if it corresponds, maybe it's just the same thing, but if there are different projects, you'll write the projects here. And then within each one, you write the progress that you made that day. And again, don't write things like, okay, I responded to these people's emails or I made these phone calls. What are the things, again, that move you measurably closer? So fill this in every day. And by the way, here's how I personally use this that you can do as well. Instead of 2 goals here, I have my purpose here. So let me put that in there. But I have 2 separate projects that are moving me toward that bigger goal. So I'll write project 1 and project 2, and then I'll write the milestones for each one and so forth. And lastly, what I've done is made another version of that so you can print out 4 weeks at a time. Before you start using this, just want to point one more thing out, and that is that this is built like a hierarchy. You see, you have your goals here, and then under the goals, what are the steps that you're going to need to hit along that? And then going down one step further, what are the goals this week that are going to move you toward those milestones, or at least toward that first milestone? And then you put in what are those things that are going to move you toward the week goals, that are going to move you toward the milestones, that are going to move you toward the goals. Take these 3 Excel sheets, fill in the missing pieces, print them out, and then fill them in every day as you get things done. Let these be your guide to being productive, to investing your time, and to moving measurably closer toward your goals. I hope these 2 tools are as helpful for you as they have been for me, and I hope you get a lot out of them.